Hello, I'm Bambang Brojonegoro, Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI. Joining me today for this episode of Asia's Developing Future is Professor Francis Fukuyama. Professor Fukuyama has been in Tokyo this week to deliver the ADBI Stanford University Leadership Academy for Development Training on Public Policy for Infrastructure. Professor Fukuyama, welcome to Tokyo and the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me here.
This is the seventh year of joint training program of ADBI and Stanford University. So maybe we can start by talking about training for policymakers. Why is investing in policymakers in training and public sector capability so critical for developing economies in Asia and Pacific today?
I think that economists have recognized for some time now that institutions are very important for growth, and institutions that are basically people. It's people that have the appropriate knowledge, skills, background to make good decisions and to implement them. Our feeling when we started this program was that uh, the world had gotten pretty good at training technocrats that knew a specific knowledge domain on a highly professional level. But many times, technocrats were not aware of, in a way, the political world and the social world that they had to operate in. And you really can't implement policies unless you confront some of those constraints and know how to navigate your way through them. So what we did over the years is to develop a program that would try to introduce policymakers to some of the challenges of implementation and precisely these kinds of political environments that they would have to operate in.
Just, maybe my curiosity. In Stanford, have you ever, tried, even once to develop some kind of training, maybe not training, maybe more like dialogue with politician, with the real politician or intended for politician regarding the similar topic that now you are delivering to the
Yeah, we,
technocrats?
so I'm in part of Stanford called the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies.
Mm,
And we are much more policy oriented than the academic departments. We're an interdisciplinary research institute, but we make a special point of connecting with actual policymakers. And
mm,
so, for example, we've got a regular program to invite, either former president or prime minister, head of
mm,
state,
mm.
to work with us. We get a lot of people that have come out of government positions, both internationally and, in the United States. So yeah, we do try to keep in contact, constant contact with political people.
Mm. Okay, very interesting. So governments in the region are increasingly required to make decisions and uncertainty and deal with complex trade-off. What skills of mindset should future public leaders develop to navigate this?
I think that increasingly you need cross-disciplinary
Mm,
training. The development field has been dominated by economists for many years, but I think that in certain ways, economists have certain blinders on
mm,
that, make it hard for them to recognize, for example, some of the implementation difficulties of the policies that they recommend. And so I think that, you need both the skills that you learn getting a PhD in economics, but you also need, uh, an understanding of political institutions, of the social and cultural conditions of the society you're operating in.
mm,
And it really requires, I think, an interdisciplinary approach to train people appropriately.
mm. Okay, so just again, one of my curiosity. I mean, in Indonesia, maybe 20 years ago, there was some kind of rivalry between what you call the economists or technocrat versus the engineers, which
Hmm.
is more on the technology.
Hmm.
So, for this kind of potential rivalry, what would be like your wisdom? For example, if you have to tell the president of the republic if there is a rivalry between these two groups, What would be your wisdom to the president?
Well, I think that actually they both have strengths and weaknesses, but they also don't cover, certain, I mean, neither engineers nor economists, in a way understand politics. And that's really critical, I think, when you're trying to implement a development policy, because you have to understand how the institutions work, what the trade-offs are, how it connects with other parts of society. And so I think that in addition to the rivalry between those groups, you probably need to add some other disciplines as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, fully understand. So now moving back to the current condition. So how do you think recent global shocks like COVID-19 and more recent geopolitical tension have changed the expectation both on what governments are capable of delivering their populace and how good policy can be implemented?
I think that we have a global problem of rising levels of distrust,
Mm,
and those levels have been exacerbated, particularly by the COVID epidemic.
mm,
In many countries, people are skeptical of public authorities because they think that they were giving bad advice during the
mm,
epidemic. And in the United States, we've had this incredible phenomenon of vaccine denialism,
mm,
where large parts of the country actually think that vaccines are bad for you and
mm,
completely contrary to the existing scientific knowledge of how they
mm,
work. So in many respects, we're going backwards.
mm,
There's rising anger, rising populism. You have many new political parties that are
mm,
challenging the status quo.
mm,
And so, I think we're entering a much more confusing and politically fractured world
mm.
than the one that we experienced even just 10 years ago.
Yeah. You mentioned about the denial about or the rejection towards vaccine in the case of COVID-19. But the fact that now we are, living in the very normal condition, maybe we start to forget about the COVID-19 itself. Do people really, yeah, are people really aware that this current normal condition is because of the what government did during the pandemic, and there are vaccines that really help the
Yeah,
human
no.
being.
Well, that's obviously true. What's an interesting problem is why even in countries with high levels of education, people don't accept that. I personally think that the internet and social media is
Oh.
one of the important drivers of this kind of, willful ignorance,
Mm,
because you know the internet has disintermediated. It's taken away all the intermediaries
mm,
that used to inform people about, just factual information.
yeah,
And they don't believe them anymore. Anyone can say anything on the internet they
yeah.
want
Mm,
and get a big audience. And truth, this criteria of truth, is not any kind of empirical verification. It's how many likes you get,
mm,
when you post something on social media.
yeah,
And so I think it allows people to live in a kind of fantasy world where things that aren't true are widely believed. And it's really going back into a earlier age of ignorance in
yeah.
many
Oh,
ways.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so back to why you are now in ADBI. So in your training, I think majority is, of course, it's about infrastructure. So when it comes to the infrastructure, what can MDBs do to help get infrastructure right, and that can help economies in Asia to move to higher income status?
I think that infrastructure is an intensely political activity. Infrastructure is meant to provide a public good, whether it's electricity, clean water, an airport, things that are generally good for everybody in an economy. The problem is that you can't build any infrastructure with harming certain individual interests.
Mm,
Somebody's going to lose access to their business, somebody
yeah,
has to give up land, other people have to suffer big disruptions, money goes into that could be spent on other things. And so, the purpose of a political system is to try to reconcile all of these competing interests so that the collective good can be achieved. And I think that that's, really what we're trying to teach,
mm,
that people that run infrastructure projects have to know, how do we get acceptance for them?
mm,
How do we, you know, um, get allies? How do we neutralize the opposition? Because most infrastructure projects have certain people that simply don't want them to go ahead.
mm,
How do we convince them? If we can't convince them, how do we prevent them from blocking,
mm,
what seems to be a public project in the public interest?
mhm.
And those kinds of considerations, I think, are the ones that we want to teach people to think about.
Yeah. So you mentioned about how to make sure that uh, some group in the community trying to block the project, but I have also but there is also another phenomenon about infrastructure, which I know you must be familiar, the white elephant project. So on the other side, now my simple question: so how do you teach this so-called technocrat or the bureaucrat how to avoid, you know, spending or wasting the budget to come up with the white elephant project?
I think that white elephant projects are often the product of individual political leaders that get some idée fixe about, what they would like to see built. One of the things that we recommend doing is to continually interact with stakeholders that are going to be directly affected by the particular project.
Mm,
And if they don't actually want, the project that is being proposed, the planners need to think about that and respond to them. It turns out that they actually don't want a railroad. They actually can use a road instead,
mm,
because they understand that, railroads are expensive and unreliable or whatever. And it's important, I think, to be in constant con- contact with and feedback from the people that are actually going to be the beneficiaries of the project, and to listen to them. In some cases, they may say, we don't want the project at all. We teach a number of cases where
mm,
actually somebody up high decided, oh, we have to have, this train station right in the middle of the city. And it turned out that nobody else wanted that. And I
mm.
think, it's important for policymakers to listen to alternative voices every now and then.
Okay. So what do you see as emerging challenges, uh, for the policymakers in Asia and Pacific in years to come?
Well, there's a huge international cooperation problem. Uh, Obviously, you think about waters, for example, the Mekong River travels through several different countries,
Hmm.
and you're already seeing conflicts over who
Hmm.
gets to dam the water, who
Yeah,
gets to
yeah.
use it, this sort of thing. So you need a solution on an international level. One big problem that I think is occurring across the board is that there's actually excess capacity at many, in many sectors of the economy,
Hmm.
because there's too much manufacturing. We probably don't need another car company
Yeah.
anywhere because of overproduction. And dealing with those kinds of issues is very difficult
Mm,
because, people want to be the place where things are made and, the center of economic activity, but not everybody can be that.
mm. Yeah, and then I like to compare between Europe, especially Western Europe and Asia, in terms of connectivity. Because I think in Europe you can easily drive from Lisbon to Paris to Netherlands, for example. But in Asia, I mean, despite some countries are islands, but majority of the countries is on the continent, right? But why is much harder in Asia to create that kind of connectivity that I believe will help,
Hmm.
to the economy of the country itself compared to what happened in Europe. I mean, even in Europe now, they already extending the network into the Eastern European.
Well, it probably helps a little bit that you've got the European Union. There's no political body of transnational cooperation
Mm,
that operates across all of the countries of Asia. You have a lot of bilateral
bilateral.
relationships, but you don't have anything like the European Union that, plans an entire road grid or, regulates air travel, this
Mm.
sort of thing. That may be one thing.
Yeah.
There's probably a longer history of international cooperation in Europe. I mean, there's been plenty of wars there,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that there's also a common set of values that apply across the European Union that also allow decision making to go a little bit more smoothly.
Oh, okay. Fine. So, since ADBI is a multilateral think tank, so what role do think tanks and academic institutions play in supporting public sector learning and shaping evidence-based governance?
Well, I think exactly those words that you spoke, you're not going to get evidence-based governance if you don't have ideas,
Yeah.
if you don't have people that have thought about the impact of policies or tried to design better policies. All of this requires an ability to analyze and also an ability to think ahead in terms of how you're going to implement those policies.
Okay. So, finally, what is one piece of advice you would give to early career policymakers in Asia striving to build resilient, effective, and trusted institutions?
I think that well, there's several things. I think that awareness of cultural and political differences across the different parts of Asia is important. So just traveling
Mm,
and being aware of how different societies will see a similar problem in different ways,
mm,
that's quite important. I think, as I said, having this kind of cross-disciplinary training, everybody has to have a specialty, but
mm,
you also have to be aware of how other intellectual approaches will see the same problem. And I
mm,
think the more diversity in the kind of background and training that you get, the better off you'll be.
mm. So maybe I can make a kind of simple conclusion. You have to be an open-minded person in order to be a good kind of policymaker.
You have to be open-minded. We all need conceptual frameworks, but sometimes you can be trapped in a single analytical framework, and
Oh,
you
okay.
may not realize that, there are other ways of thinking about things.
Mm.
So I think that's just a different way of putting what you just expressed.
Oh, okay. It has been great to talk with you, Professor Fukuyama. Thank you for joining our podcast today.
All right. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you.